The day I discovered my own son had been systematically planning my humiliation for months, I was standing in Terminal 2 at LAX, holding a boarding pass that didn't exist, surrounded by luggage I'd packed with the excitement of a child on Christmas morning. My name is Robert Mitchell, I'm 63 years old, and I'm about to tell you the most painful story of my life, one that changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the price of unconditional love. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, I need to ask something of you. Wherever you're watching this from, whether you're in your car during lunch break in Detroit, lying in bed in Phoenix, or walking through the streets of New York, please take a second to comment below and tell me where you are. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just my story. It's a story about betrayal that could happen to anyone, anywhere, and I have a feeling many of you have experienced something similar. You see, the morning of December 23rd started like any other day, except it wasn't. I woke up in my empty house in Riverside, California, the same house where I'd raised my children after my wife Sarah passed away 7 years ago. The silence that morning felt different, heavier, like the air before a thunderstorm. I should have recognized it as a warning. I'd been planning this Hawaii vacation for 8 months. Not just planning, obsessing over every detail. After Sarah died, my relationship with my kids had become strained. My son Marcus, 31, had always been distant, but after his mother's funeral, he became cold, calculating. My daughter Jennifer, 28, followed his lead like she always did. They blamed me for not being there enough when Sarah was sick, for working too many hours at the construction company I'd built from nothing, for prioritizing business over family during those final months. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had been too focused on keeping the business afloat to spend enough time holding Sarah's hand in those sterile hospital rooms. But everything I did, every 16-hour day, every missed dinner, every postponed vacation, it was all for them. To give them a life better than the one I had growing up in a trailer park in Bakersfield. The Hawaii trip was my attempt at redemption. I'd sold a piece of property I'd been holding onto for 15 years. Land that was supposed to be my retirement nest egg, to fund what I called our healing vacation. $30,000. Every penny I could scrape together without touching the kids' inheritance. I booked the Royal Hawaiian on Waikiki Beach, the same hotel where Sarah and I had honeymooned 29 years earlier. 5 bedrooms, ocean view, a week of pure luxury for Marcus, his wife Amanda, their 2 kids, Jennifer, her boyfriend Tyler, and me. I remember the day I called Marcus to tell him about the trip. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, and I could hear the reluctance in his voice even through that simple greeting. When I explained what I'd planned, there was a long pause. Too long. Then he said the words that should have been my first red flag. "That's really generous, Dad. Amanda and I will have to check our schedules." Check their schedules? I was offering them a free week in paradise, and they needed to check their schedules? But I pushed forward. I was desperate to reconnect with my children, desperate to prove that I could be the father they needed, even if it was 7 years too late. I sent them the itinerary via email, detailed spreadsheets with flight times, hotel confirmations, restaurant reservations, even a day-by-day breakdown of activities. Snorkeling at Hanauma Bay, sunset dinners at Duke's, helicopter tours over the Na Pali coast. I'd researched every detail for months, reading reviews, calling hotels, making sure everything would be perfect. The responses I got back were lukewarm at best. Jennifer sent a short text. "Looks nice, Dad." "Thanks." Marcus called back 3 days later with a list of suggestions, changes he wanted made to the itinerary, different restaurants, different activities. I agreed to everything. I would have agreed to anything to have my family together again. If you've ever felt that desperate need to fix a broken relationship, you'll understand what I did next. If you've ever found yourself bending over backwards for people who seem determined to stay distant, you know exactly how I felt. And if you've experienced that, please hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to hear how this story ends. Trust me, it gets much worse before it gets better. 2 weeks before the trip, Marcus called with the first complication. The flights I'd booked weren't going to work for them. They wanted to leave a day earlier, return a day later. The change fees alone cost me an additional $2,000, but I paid them without complaint. A week later, Jennifer called. She wanted to bring her friend Michelle instead of Tyler. Another round of changes, another $1,500 in fees. Each time I accommodated their requests, I felt like I was buying back pieces of their love. Each concession was a small price to pay for the possibility of redemption, for the chance to be the father they deserved, for the opportunity to honor Sarah's memory by bringing our fractured family back together. The night before we were supposed to leave, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sarah's picture on the nightstand catching the moonlight streaming through the blinds. I whispered to her in the darkness, like I did every night. I hope this works, baby. I hope I can fix what I broke. I woke up at 4 in the morning on December 24th, Christmas Eve, and spent 3 hours double-checking everything. Boarding passes printed, luggage packed, gifts wrapped and carefully distributed between suitcases. I'd even bought everyone new outfits for our first family photo on the beach, clothes that coordinated but didn't match, the way Sarah always used to plan our family pictures. The drive to LAX should have taken an hour and 15 minutes. I gave myself 3 hours, stopping twice to make sure I had everything, calling Marcus once to confirm our meeting point at Terminal 2. He sounded distracted, almost annoyed that I was calling. Yeah, Dad will be there. Relax. Relax. If only I had known what was waiting for me. I arrived at the airport at 9:30, 2 hours before our scheduled departure. The place was chaos. Christmas Eve travel, families everywhere, children screaming, adults stressed about connections and weather delays. But I felt oddly calm. For the first time in months, I had a sense of purpose. This was going to be the trip that changed everything. I found our meeting spot near the American Airlines check-in counter and waited. And waited. At 10:15, I called Marcus. Straight to voicemail. I called Jennifer. The same. Amanda didn't answer either. For the first time that morning, a cold knot formed in my stomach. At 10:30, I saw them walking toward me through the crowd. Marcus was pushing a cart loaded with designer luggage I didn't recognize. Amanda was beside him, wearing oversized sunglasses and an expression I couldn't read. Jennifer and Michelle were laughing about something, their voices carrying that particular pitch of excitement that comes with vacation anticipation. But as they got closer, something felt wrong. The way Marcus avoided eye contact. The way Amanda kept checking her phone. The way Jennifer's laughter seemed forced, artificial. Dad, Marcus said when he reached me, his voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, cold, almost clinical. We need to talk. That's when my world started to collapse. Standing in that crowded airport, surrounded by the sounds of Christmas travel, my son looked me in the eyes and spoke the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I forgot to buy you a ticket. Just go home now. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching for the check-in counter to steady myself. Around us, families continued their Christmas Eve routines, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just imploded in the span of 6 seconds. What do you mean you forgot? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. You don't forget to buy a ticket for the person funding the entire trip. You don't forget to include the father who's been planning every detail for 8 months. Marcus shifted his weight, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, maybe, or regret. But it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. Amanda stepped closer to him, her hand finding his arm in a gesture that looked more protective than supportive. Look, Dad, he continued, his voice gaining strength, becoming more confident with each word. We talked about it as a family, and we decided this would be better. You know how you get on vacation, stressed about money, complaining about everything, trying to control every minute of every day. We just want to relax and enjoy ourselves. Jennifer nodded, avoiding my eyes. It's nothing personal, Daddy. We just think it would be better if you stayed home this time. Nothing personal. 29 years of being a father, 7 years of widow grief, 8 months of planning, $30,000 of my retirement savings, and it was nothing personal. The terminal around me seemed to blur at the edges. The sounds became muffled, like I was underwater. I could see families everywhere, fathers lifting children onto their shoulders, mothers organizing boarding passes, grandparents being fussed over by grateful children. Normal families. Families that worked the way they were supposed to. I want to pause here for a moment because I can see some of you shaking your heads, thinking this can't be real. But for those of you who have adult children, for those of you who have watched relationships deteriorate after losing a spouse, for those of you who know the particular pain of feeling like a stranger in your own family, you know this is real. You know betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people you love most. If that resonates with you, please take a second to like this video. Not for me, but for everyone else watching who needs to know they're not alone in this kind of pain. Marcus, I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by a growing anger. I paid for this entire trip. The hotel, the flights, the restaurant reservations, everything. This was my idea, my money, And we appreciate that. Amanda interrupted, speaking for the first time. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this conversation. That's why we're still going. We're not wasting your investment. We're just making sure everyone has a good time. The logic was so twisted, so cruel, that I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that came from somewhere deep in my chest. You're taking my money and excluding me for my own good? Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be, Jennifer said, finally looking at me directly. For just a moment, I saw my little girl, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap watching Disney movies, the one who insisted I read her bedtime stories in different voices for each character, the one who cried when I left for business trips. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Marcus pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something, effectively dismissing me. The gate for our flight is in Terminal 4. We need to get going through security. Our flight, I repeated. The flight I'm paying for. The vacation I planned. The family trip that was supposed to help us reconnect. Dad, you're making a scene, Jennifer whispered, glancing around at the other travelers who were starting to notice our conversation. And that's when it hit me, the full magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This wasn't Marcus forgetting to buy my ticket. This was planned. Calculated. They had known for weeks, maybe months, that they were going to exclude me. Every phone call where I'd shared my excitement about the trip, every email with updated itineraries, every accommodation I'd made to their requests, they were probably laughing about it behind my back. I thought about all the times I'd called Marcus over the past few months, sharing details about the restaurants I'd found, the activities I'd planned, the surprises I had in store for the grandkids. How many times had he gotten off the phone and told Amanda about the pathetic old man who thought he could buy his way back into their good graces? The betrayal was breathtaking in its cruelty. They could have simply told me they didn't want me on the trip. It would have hurt, but I would have understood. Instead, they let me plan, let me pay, let me dream about our family reunion, all while knowing they intended to abandon me at the airport. How long have you been planning this? I asked, my voice now steady with a cold fury I didn't know I possessed. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. Planning what? Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else. How long have you known you were going to leave me here? The silence stretched between us, filled with the ambient noise of the airport, announcements over the intercom, rolling luggage, crying children. Finally, Amanda spoke. Robert, we've been concerned about your behavior since Mom died. The way you've been trying to force family time, demanding we spend holidays with you, calling constantly. We thought maybe some time apart would be good for everyone. Force family time. I'd been forcing family time by wanting to spend Christmas with my children and grandchildren. I'd been demanding too much by hoping for Sunday dinners once a month. I'd been calling constantly by checking in once a week. Something inside me shifted in that moment. The desperate, pleading father who had been willing to pay any price for their love began to die, replaced by someone harder, angrier, more calculating. "You're right," I said quietly. "Time apart might be exactly what we need." I turned around and walked away. I didn't look back, didn't wait for their response, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. But I heard Jennifer call after me, her voice uncertain now, maybe realizing they had gone too far. "Daddy, wait." I kept walking. Out of Terminal 2, through the maze of corridors and moving walkways, past the security checkpoints where other families were beginning their holiday adventures. I walked until I reached my truck in the long-term parking garage, where I sat behind the wheel for 20 minutes, shaking with rage and grief and something else I couldn't name yet. Revenge? No, not yet. That would come later. What I felt in that moment was clarity. For the first time since Sarah died, I saw my children exactly as they were, not as the loving, grateful kids I remembered, not as the adults I hoped they would become, but as the entitled, manipulative strangers they had chosen to be. I started the truck and drove home, but I wasn't the same man who had left that morning. The father who would have done anything for his children's love was gone. In his place sat someone who understood, perhaps for the first time, that love without respect is just weakness, and weakness invites cruelty. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Riverside, I had made a decision. If my children wanted time apart, they were going to get more than they'd bargained for. If they thought they could use me as their personal ATM while treating me like an embarrassing obligation, they were about to learn otherwise. The game had changed, and they didn't even know we were playing yet. I spent Christmas Day alone for the first time in my adult life. Not by choice, but by design, their design. While my family sipped Mai Tais on Waikiki Beach with money I'd earned through 40 years of 12-hour days and calloused hands, I sat in my empty living room, staring at Sarah's picture and planning my response to the cruelest betrayal I'd ever experienced. The house felt different that morning. Quieter, yes, but also somehow more honest. The desperate energy I'd been carrying for months, the frantic need to reconnect with my children, to prove my worth as a father, to honor Sarah's memory by keeping our family together, all of that was gone, replaced by a cold, clear focus I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee in the kitchen Sarah had redesigned just before she got sick, sat at the breakfast bar where we'd shared 30 years of morning conversations, and began to plan. Not a vacation this time. Not a gesture of love or reconciliation. This was going to be something entirely different. For those of you who have ever been systematically humiliated by people you loved unconditionally, you know what I'm talking about. There's a moment when the grief transforms into something harder, sharper. When you stop asking, "How could they do this to me?" and start asking, "How am I going to respond?" If you've been there, you understand. If you haven't, I hope you never do. But please, take a moment to share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Because what happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. The first thing I did was call the Royal Hawaiian. I wanted to know if they had actually checked in, if they were really there living it up on my dime. The concierge, a pleasant woman named Keiko, confirmed that the Mitchell family had indeed arrived and were settled into their Ocean View suite. "Would you like me to connect you to their room?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I am the one who made the reservation and provided the credit card. I need to make a change." Within 15 minutes, I had removed my credit card from all hotel charges effective immediately. Any additional expenses, room service, spa treatments, excursions, anything beyond the prepaid room rate, would now need to be covered by them. It was a small gesture, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Next, I called my attorney, David Hernandez. David had been handling my business and personal legal matters for 15 years. He knew about Sarah's death, knew about the strain with my kids, knew about the financial sacrifices I'd made to try to keep the family together. "Bob, I'm sorry to hear about Hawaii," he said after I explained what had happened. "That's unconscionable, even for family. I need to know my options, David. Both personal and business." We talked for over an hour. David explained that while my children had no legal obligation to include me in family activities, I also had no legal obligation to continue supporting them financially. More importantly, we discussed my will, the trust I'd established for the grandchildren, and the various ways my children had been benefiting from my generosity without actually acknowledging it. Marcus worked for my construction company, not because he was qualified or even particularly good at the job, but because he was my son. His salary was 30% above market rate for his actual contributions. Jennifer had been living rent-free in a property I owned in Orange County for 3 years, ostensibly while she found herself as an artist. Both of them had credit cards connected to my business account for emergencies that seemed to occur with remarkable frequency. I'd been subsidizing their lives to the tune of nearly $80,000 a year, all while they complained about my presence in their lives. "David," I said, "I want to make some changes." That afternoon, I drove to the office. Mitchell Construction had been closed for the holidays, but I had keys to everything. I spent 4 hours going through personnel files, financial records, and expense reports. What I found made my Hawaii humiliation seem almost insignificant by comparison. Marcus had been using the company credit card for personal expenses for over 2 years. Not just small things, entire family vacations, designer clothes for Amanda, private school tuition for their kids that he claimed were business education expenses. The total was staggering, more than $45,000 in fraudulent charges over 24 months. But what really twisted the knife was finding the emails. Marcus had apparently been using his company computer for personal correspondence, and our IT policy automatically backed up all emails to our central server. What I discovered there revealed the true depth of their contempt for me. An email to Amanda from 6 months earlier. "Dad's getting more pathetic every week. He actually thinks we're going to start having family dinners again. I almost feel sorry for him, but the money's too good to rock the boat." Another one to Jennifer from 3 months ago. "The old man is planning some big Hawaii trip. Probably going to be a nightmare, but free vacation is free vacation. Maybe we can find a way to ditch him once we get there." And then, the one that broke my heart completely. An email to Jennifer from 2 weeks before the trip. "Amanda had a genius idea. What if we just don't buy Dad a ticket? Tell him it was a mistake, send him home, and enjoy the vacation without having to deal with his constant need for validation. It's perfect." Jennifer's response. "That's kind of cruel, even for us. But honestly, I'm dreading a week of him trying to recreate family memories with Mom. Maybe it would be better for everyone." They hadn't just planned to exclude me. They had planned it weeks in advance, discussed it, refined it, and agreed it was the best approach. The cruelty wasn't incidental, it was the point. I printed out every relevant email, every fraudulent expense report, every piece of evidence that showed how thoroughly they had been taking advantage of me while actively planning my humiliation. Then I drove home and made a list. Marcus, fired from Mitchell Construction, effective immediately. Company credit card cancelled. Fraudulent expenses to be repaid or reported as theft. Jennifer, eviction notice for the Orange County property. 30 days to vacate. Both, removed from all emergency contact information for medical and financial accounts. All credit cards with my name cancelled. All automatic payments for their benefit stopped. The will, completely rewritten. Instead of splitting my estate between them, the bulk would go to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids interested in construction trades. They would each receive exactly $1, enough to prove they hadn't been forgotten, not enough to matter. But I wasn't done. The nuclear option was still coming. I spent the rest of Christmas Day making phone calls and sending emails. By evening, I had accomplished more in one day than I had in years of trying to rebuild our relationship through kindness and accommodation. The silence from Hawaii was deafening. No phone calls, no texts, no messages asking if I'd made it home safely or apologizing for the airport ambush. Nothing. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist the moment they walked away from me in Terminal 2. But that silence was about to become their problem, not mine. On December 26th, while they were probably enjoying their second day of paradise, I implemented the first phase of my response. Marcus would arrive home to find his company credit card declined, his access to the business computers revoked, and a termination letter waiting in his mailbox. Jennifer would find an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. The best part? They had no way to reach me to complain. I'd changed my phone number and hadn't given them the new one. If they wanted to communicate with me, they would have to do it the old-fashioned way, in person, with respect, acknowledging what they had done and asking for forgiveness. But I wasn't holding my breath. These were the same people who could abandon their father at an airport on Christmas Eve and then enjoy a luxury vacation without a second thought. Remorse wasn't exactly their strong suit. As I went to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not happiness, that would be a long time coming, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I was finally done being anyone's victim. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. And honestly, I was looking forward to it. The first missed call came at 6:47 a.m. on December 27th. My old phone, the one I'd turned off and put in a drawer, lit up with Marcus's name. Then another at 6:52. Then Jennifer at 7:15. By the time I finished my morning coffee, I had missed calls from both kids, Amanda, even Michelle, Jennifer's friend who had taken Tyler's place on the trip. I smiled as I scrolled through the growing list of missed calls on my old phone. They were just discovering the first wave of consequences, and panic was setting in. But I wasn't ready to talk to them yet. Not by a long shot. Let me paint you a picture of what they woke up to in paradise. Marcus probably got his first hint that something was wrong when he tried to use the company credit card for breakfast, and it was declined. Embarrassing, but not catastrophic. Then he likely tried to check his work emails to see if there was some kind of system error, only to find his access completely blocked. Meanwhile, Jennifer had returned to her apartment in Orange County to find official eviction papers taped to her door, along with a notice that all utilities would be transferred out of my name effective January 1st. She'd been living rent-free for 3 years, and suddenly she had 30 days to find both a new place to live and a way to pay for it. The beauty of it was the timing. They were stuck in Hawaii until January 2nd, their return flight wasn't for another 6 days. They couldn't confront me in person, couldn't show up at my door demanding explanations. They could only call and leave increasingly frantic voicemails on a phone I would never answer again. For those of you who have ever been taken advantage of by family members, who have ever had your generosity treated as weakness, who have ever been made to feel like your love was an inconvenience, this moment of turning the tables might sound familiar. Sometimes the only way people understand your value is when you remove it completely from their lives. If you're nodding along, thinking about your own family dynamics, please hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next is going to show you exactly how quickly people's attitudes can change when the money stops flowing. By noon, I had 43 missed calls across all their numbers. The voicemails started off confused, then became angry, then shifted to pleading. Let me share a few excerpts, because they perfectly illustrate the journey from entitlement to desperation. Marcus, 8:30 a.m. Dad, there's some kind of problem with my company card. It's not working, and I can't access my email. Call me back so we can sort this out. Jennifer, 9:15 a.m. Daddy, there's been some kind of mistake. There are eviction papers on my door, but I know you wouldn't do this without talking to me first. Please call me back. Amanda, 10:20 a.m. Robert, I don't know what's going on, but Marcus is freaking out and we need to talk to you. This is affecting the whole family. Marcus, 11:45 a.m. Dad, this isn't funny anymore. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now fix this and call me back. Notice the progression? First, it was just a mistake. Then it was something I would never really do. Then it became a point I was trying to make, as if humiliating me at the airport was just a minor disagreement between reasonable people. But my favorite voicemail came from Jennifer at 2:30 that afternoon. Daddy, please, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. I can't lose my apartment. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please just call me back and tell me what I did wrong. What she did wrong. After 30 years of being their father, after 7 years of trying to rebuild our relationship following Sarah's death, After 8 months of planning and paying for their dream vacation, she couldn't figure out what she had done wrong. I spent that day handling business. I met with David to finalize the changes to my will. I contacted my accountant to restructure my finances so that none of my children would have any automatic access to my resources. I even visited Sarah's grave to tell her what I was doing. "I know you wouldn't approve of the way I'm handling this," I said to her headstone, brushing away the leaves that had gathered since my last visit. "You always believed in forgiveness, in keeping the family together no matter what. But they crossed a line, Sarah. They planned to hurt me, and they enjoyed it. You can't enable that kind of cruelty and call it love." The wind picked up as I spoke, rattling the oak tree Sarah had always loved. For a moment I imagined I could hear her voice telling me to be careful, to make sure I didn't become something I wouldn't recognize. But the anger in my chest was stronger than any ghostly wisdom. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my brother Tom in Phoenix. Tom and I had drifted apart after Sarah's funeral, partly because he tried to warn me about Marcus and Jennifer's behavior, and I hadn't wanted to hear it. "Bob?" Tom sounded surprised to hear from me. "Everything okay?" I told him everything. The Hawaii trip, the airport confrontation, what I'd found in the company records, and what I'd done in response. Tom listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You know what the worst part is?" he finally said. "I'm not surprised. Linda and I have been watching this train wreck for years, waiting for you to see what everyone else could see. Why didn't you say something? We tried, remember? After Sarah's funeral, when Marcus made that comment about how the life insurance money should be split between them immediately instead of waiting for your death. When Jennifer started treating your house like a free hotel whenever she had problems with her boyfriends. You defended them every time." He was right. I had defended them, made excuses for their behavior, convinced myself that grief was making everyone act strangely and that time would heal the wounds. I'd been so desperate to preserve the idea of our family that I'd ignored the reality of who they had become. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "Honestly? I think you should have done this years ago. But Bob, be careful. Don't let this turn you into someone Sarah wouldn't recognize. There's a difference between setting boundaries and seeking revenge." After I hung up with Tom, I sat in my living room and thought about that distinction. Was I setting boundaries, or was I seeking revenge? The truth was, it was probably both. But after what they'd done to me, after the months of planning my humiliation, after taking my money while mocking me behind my back, maybe a little revenge was exactly what they needed. By the end of the day, I had 71 missed calls. The voicemails were getting desperate now, with Marcus threatening to call the police, for what, I wondered, taking away financial support that was never owed in the first place, and Jennifer sobbing into the phone about how sorry she was. But sorry for what, exactly? Sorry they got caught? Sorry their free ride was over? Sorry they had underestimated their old man's capacity for strategic thinking? I turned off the old phone and went to bed early. Tomorrow, I had one more surprise planned for them, and this one was going to hurt in a way that money couldn't fix. The best part about having children is watching them grow into good people. The worst part about having children is discovering they haven't. My kids were about to learn which category they fell into. December 28th brought a new level of desperation from Hawaii. By morning, I had over 100 missed calls, and the voicemails had taken on an increasingly frantic tone. But what really caught my attention was a Facebook message from Amanda. Apparently they were now trying to reach me through social media since I wasn't responding to calls. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Robert, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're hurting innocent people with this tantrum. The kids are asking why Grandpa is being mean to Mommy and Daddy. Please stop this before you damage your relationship with your grandchildren permanently." My grandchildren. She was using my grandchildren as emotional blackmail, trying to guilt me into backing down by threatening the one relationship that still mattered to me. That message told me everything I needed to know about how little they understood the situation, and how little they respected me as a person. But Amanda had made a critical error. She had opened the door to a public conversation, and I was more than ready to walk through it. You see, for 7 years I had maintained the illusion that our family was healing, that we were working through our grief together, that the distance between us was temporary and understandable. I had never told anyone, not friends, not extended family, not business associates, about the real dynamics at play. I had protected their reputations at the expense of my own sanity. That protection was about to end. Before I go further, I need you to understand something. What I did next was calculated to cause maximum damage to their social standing, and I'm not entirely proud of it. But sometimes, when people insist on treating you like you don't matter, the only way to get their attention is to show them exactly how much you do matter, and how much damage you can cause when you stop playing by their rules. If you've ever reached that breaking point where protecting someone else's reputation becomes less important than protecting your own dignity, you'll understand what I did next. And if you've been there, please take a second to like this video, because you know how hard it is to make that choice. I opened Facebook, an account I rarely used but maintained to see pictures of my grandchildren, and began typing a post that would change everything. I want to share something with all of our friends and family, because I believe in honesty and transparency, even when it's painful. Yesterday, I discovered that my children Marcus and Jennifer, along with Marcus's wife Amanda, had planned for weeks to exclude me from a family vacation that I funded entirely, $30,000 of my retirement savings. They allowed me to plan every detail, make every reservation, and get excited about healing our family, all while knowing they intended to abandon me at the airport. When I arrived at LAX on Christmas Eve with my luggage, excited to spend a week reconnecting with my children and grandchildren, Marcus looked me in the eye and said, "I forgot to buy you a ticket. Just go home now." Then they took their designer luggage, purchased with money they'd been stealing from my company, and walked away to enjoy the vacation I paid for. I'm sharing this not to hurt them, but because I'm done protecting people who have chosen cruelty over love. I'm done enabling adults who take everything and give nothing back. And I'm done pretending that family means tolerating any behavior, no matter how devastating, just because we share DNA. To Marcus and Jennifer, you wanted time apart from your father. You have it. Permanently. I hit publish and watched as my phone, the new number they didn't have, immediately started buzzing with notifications. Comments began pouring in within minutes, and what I saw there surprised me. I had expected people to urge forgiveness, to suggest that family problems should be kept private, to tell me I was being too harsh. Instead, comment after comment expressed outrage on my behalf. Sarah's sister Carol. I am absolutely disgusted. Sarah would be heartbroken to see how her children have treated you. You deserve so much better than this. My business partner Frank. Bob, I had no idea things had gotten this bad. What they did was unforgivable. You've been nothing but generous with those kids. Tom's wife Linda. Finally. Bob, we've been watching this happen for years and wondering when you'd stop letting them walk all over you. Even people I barely knew, neighbors, clients, casual acquaintances, were expressing shock and support. But the most powerful responses came from other parents who had experienced similar betrayals. Margaret, a woman from my church. My daughter did something similar to me last Christmas. Thank you for having the courage to speak the truth about what adult children sometimes do to parents who love them too much. David Chen, a business colleague. This is every parent's nightmare. You raised them, sacrificed for them, and they repaid you with calculated cruelty. I'm sorry, Bob. Within 2 hours, the post had 43 comments and 26 shares. My story was spreading through our social network like wildfire, and with each share, Marcus and Jennifer's actions were being exposed to a wider circle of people who knew our family. But the real explosion came when their friends started seeing the post. Amanda's sister Jessica commented, "I can't believe this. Amanda never told me any of this. How could they do this to you?" Marcus's college roommate Jake. "Dude, this is messed up. I thought you were exaggerating when you complained about your dad wanting to spend time with the family." Jennifer's art school friend Maya. "Jen, what the hell? Your dad has always been so supportive of your work. This is heartbreaking." The beautiful thing about social media is that it's very hard to control the narrative once the truth gets out. Marcus and Jennifer had probably been telling their friends for years that I was overbearing, demanding, difficult to deal with. Now those same friends were seeing concrete evidence of who had really been mistreated in our family. My phone rang at 2:17 p.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it. "Grandpa Bob?" The voice was small, uncertain. My granddaughter Emma, Marcus's 8-year-old. My heart clenched. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you? Daddy is really mad and Mommy is crying. They said you were being mean to them and that's why we can't come see you anymore." Her voice was confused, hurt. "Why are you being mean, Grandpa?" This was Amanda's nuclear option, putting my granddaughter on the phone to guilt me into backing down. Using an 8-year-old as an emotional weapon was a new low, even for them. "Emma," I said carefully, "Grandpa isn't being mean. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that have consequences, and your daddy and mommy made some choices that hurt Grandpa very badly. But I want you to know that I love you and your brother very much, and that will never change. But Daddy says you're trying to make us poor and homeless." The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. They were not only manipulating my granddaughter, they were lying to her, making me the villain in a situation they had created through their own greed and cruelty. "Emma, can you put Daddy on the phone?" There was some muffled conversation, then Marcus's voice. "Dad, finally. Look, I don't know what's gotten into you, but put my granddaughter in another room. Now." Something in my voice must have convinced him, because I heard him tell Emma to go play with her brother. Then he came back on the line. "Dad, we need to talk about this like adults." "Adults?" My voice was quiet, deadly calm. "Adults don't plan their father's humiliation for weeks. Adults don't steal from their father's company. Adults don't use children as emotional weapons. You want to be treated like an adult, Marcus? Start acting like one. Look, maybe we handled the airport thing wrong. Maybe? You planned to abandon me at LAX on Christmas Eve after I spent my retirement savings on a vacation for you. Then you enjoyed that vacation while I spent Christmas alone for the first time in my adult life. There's no maybe about it, son." The word son came out like a curse, and I could hear him flinch through the phone. "Dad, I'm sorry, okay? We're all sorry. But this nuclear option you've chosen is hurting everyone. Emma and Jake don't understand why Grandpa suddenly hates them. I don't hate them. I hate you. I hate what you've become, what you've chosen to be. I hate that I spent 31 years believing you were a good man who just needed time to find his way." The silence stretched between us across 4,000 miles of ocean and 7 years of accumulated resentment. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that treating people like they don't matter will eventually make them stop mattering to you. I want you to learn that love without respect is just exploitation." "Okay, I get it. I understand. Now can we fix this?" Fix this. As if $45,000 in stolen company funds could be fixed. As if years of contempt and manipulation could be fixed. As if the look in his eyes when he told me to go home from the airport could be fixed. "Marcus," I said, "let me ask you something. In all those voicemails you've left over the past 2 days, in all those frantic calls, have you once, even once, said you were sorry for what you did to me? Not sorry that there are consequences, not sorry that you got caught, not sorry that your free ride is over. Sorry for hurting me." Another long silence. "Dad, That's what I thought. Call me when you have an answer to that question. If you ever have an answer to that question." I hung up and turned off the phone. But I wasn't done with my public revelation. If they wanted to play dirty by involving my grandchildren, then the gloves were coming completely off. I opened my laptop and began typing a follow-up post that would remove any remaining doubt about who the victims were in this story. The second Facebook post was longer, more detailed, and designed to burn every bridge they had left. I included screenshots of the emails I'd found on Marcus's computer, a detailed breakdown of the fraudulent company expenses, and copies of the eviction notice I'd served to Jennifer. But most importantly, I included the phone conversation I just had with Marcus, where he still couldn't bring himself to apologize for the original betrayal. Update on yesterday's post about my children abandoning me at the airport. I've now discovered this wasn't just cruelty, it was theft. Marcus has been using company funds for personal expenses for over 2 years, totaling $45,000. Jennifer has been living rent-free in my property for 3 years while claiming she can't afford basic necessities. But when I confronted Marcus today, he still couldn't apologize for planning my humiliation. He could only ask how to fix the consequences. I attached photos of the email where Marcus called me pathetic and discussed how the money's too good to rock the boat. I included screenshots of fraudulent expense reports labeled as business education that were actually private school tuition for his children. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The post was shared over 60 times in the first hour. Comments poured in from friends, family, business associates, and complete strangers who had heard the story through their own networks. But the most devastating responses came from people who worked with Marcus and Jennifer professionally. Marcus's supervisor at the construction company, Jim Rodriguez. "Bob, I had no idea Marcus was your son. Now his attitude around the office makes perfect sense. Don't worry, word of this won't hurt your company's reputation. Everyone knows you're a man of integrity." Jennifer's art gallery owner, Patricia Williams. "I've been wondering why Jennifer could afford such expensive materials when she claimed to be struggling financially. Now I understand she was never struggling at all." The owner of the private school Marcus's children attended, Dr. Elizabeth Franklin. "Mr. Mitchell, we had no idea those tuition payments were unauthorized company expenses. We'll be reviewing our payment records immediately." Within 6 hours, my story had been shared over 200 times and reached thousands of people. Marcus and Jennifer's betrayal was no longer a private family matter. It was a public scandal that would follow them for years. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. At 8:30 p.m., my new phone rang. The caller ID showed Hawaiian Airlines customer service. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Rebecca calling from Hawaiian Airlines. I'm calling because we've had some unusual activity on a reservation under your name." "What kind of activity?" "Well, sir, someone has been calling repeatedly trying to change the return flight for the Mitchell party currently in Honolulu. They claim to be you, but they don't have access to the credit card used to make the original booking, and they can't answer basic verification questions. We wanted to confirm, did you authorize anyone to make changes to this reservation?" I smiled for the first time in days. They were trapped in paradise, unable to change their return flight because I had booked it with a credit card they didn't have access to and under information only I knew. "No," I told Rebecca. "I did not authorize anyone to make changes to that reservation. Should we cancel the return flights entirely?" For a moment, I was tempted. The thought of leaving them stranded in Hawaii with no way home unless they paid for new flights that would cost at least $4,000 during the holiday season, was deeply satisfying. But even in my anger, I wasn't quite ready to cross that line yet. "No, keep the return flights as scheduled. But put a note on the account that only I can authorize changes, and I'll need to provide photo ID and the original credit card to do so." "Understood, Mr. Mitchell." "And sir? I saw your Facebook post. My daughter shared it with me. What happened to you was inexcusable, and I hope your children learned something from this." My Facebook post had reached Hawaiian Airlines customer service. The story was spreading far beyond my immediate social circle, taking on a life of its own. After I hung up with Rebecca, I poured myself 3 fingers of the bourbon Sarah and I had been saving for a special occasion and sat in my recliner to read the rest of the comments on my posts. What I found there was a revelation. Dozens of people were sharing their own stories of adult children who had taken advantage of their generosity, manipulated their love, or betrayed their trust. Parents who had been cut out of grandchildren's lives for refusing to be ATMs. Fathers who had worked themselves into early graves trying to prove their love to children who saw them only as sources of money. Mothers who had been abandoned in nursing homes by children who suddenly became too busy to visit once the inheritance was secured. Margaret, the woman from my church, wrote a long comment about her own daughter. She didn't speak to me for 2 years because I wouldn't co-sign a loan for a car she couldn't afford. But the moment she needed someone to babysit her kids for free while she went on vacation, suddenly I was family again. David Chin shared his story. My son asked to borrow $20,000 for a business opportunity. When I asked for details, he accused me of not trusting him and not supporting his dreams. Later I found out it was to pay off gambling debts. Frank, my business partner, revealed something I'd never known. My daughter hasn't spoken to me since I refused to buy her a house for her 30th birthday. Apparently, giving her a car, paying for her wedding, and covering her credit card debt for 5 years wasn't enough to prove I loved her. Reading these stories, I realized I wasn't alone. There was an entire generation of parents who had confused enabling with love, who had raised children to believe they were entitled to everything without earning anything, who had sacrificed their own dignity trying to buy affection from people who saw them as walking bank accounts. The saddest part was how many of these parents were still making excuses for their children, still hoping that just a little more generosity would finally earn them the respect and gratitude they craved. I had been one of those parents until 3 days ago. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Obviously, one of them had gotten a new phone or was borrowing someone else's. Dad, please. The whole world is seeing this. You're destroying our reputations, our careers, everything. I'm begging you to delete the posts. We'll pay back every penny, we'll make this right, but please stop the public humiliation. I stared at that message for a long time. They would pay back every penny, money they never would have returned if they hadn't been caught. They would make this right, after years of making it wrong. They wanted me to stop the public humiliation, but they felt no remorse for the private humiliation they had planned and executed. I typed back. You had 2 years to pay back the money you stole. You had 8 months to tell me the truth about the vacation. You had 7 years to treat me with basic human decency. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. The response came immediately. That's not fair. We made mistakes, but we're still your children. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Doesn't that mean anything to you? They were using our relationship as a shield against the consequences of their own actions, invoking family loyalty while showing none themselves. I typed one final message. Being my children means everything to me. It's why this hurts so much. But being your father doesn't mean I have to accept being treated like your personal ATM. When you're ready to apologize for what you actually did, not just for getting caught, you know how to reach me. Then I blocked the number. Tomorrow was December 29th. They were supposed to return from Hawaii on January 2nd. That gave me 4 more days to decide how far I was willing to take this nuclear war they had started. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. The old Robert Mitchell would have accepted that text as progress, would have been grateful for any acknowledgement of wrongdoing, would have started the process of forgiveness before they had even proven they deserved it. But the old Robert Mitchell died in Terminal 2 at LAX on Christmas Eve. The new Robert Mitchell was just getting started. January 2nd, 2024. The day my children were scheduled to return from their Hawaiian paradise. The paradise I had unknowingly funded as my own humiliation. But they weren't coming home to the same world they had left. While they'd been sipping Mai Tais and posting Instagram photos of sunsets I'd paid for, I'd been systematically dismantling the financial safety net I'd spent years building beneath them. I woke up that morning with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a kid waiting to see if Santa had brought me the bicycle I'd been dreaming about. Except this time, I was Santa, and the gift I was delivering was a harsh lesson in consequences. Their flight was supposed to land at LAX at 3:47 p.m. I knew this because I had booked it, just like I'd booked everything else they'd enjoyed while treating me like an unwanted burden. But I had no intention of being there to pick them up. Those days of jumping through hoops for their convenience were over. Instead, I spent the morning at my lawyer's office, signing the final documents that would complete their transition from entitled beneficiaries to ordinary adults who would have to earn their own way in the world. David looked up from the papers as I signed my name for the last time. Bob, are you sure about this? Once these documents are filed, there's no going back. Your will completely disinherits them, the trust fund for the grandchildren is dissolved, and all your assets will go to the scholarship foundation you've established. I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. David, I spent 30 years building wealth to leave to my children. What I've learned is that giving someone everything they need while demanding nothing in return doesn't create grateful children. It creates entitled adults who see you as an obstacle to their inheritance. And the grandchildren? You're certain about removing them from the will as well? That question hit harder than the others. Emma and Jake were innocent in all this, victims of their parents' greed and manipulation just as much as I was. But I had come to realize something painful. I couldn't save my grandchildren from their parents. If I left them money, it would just give Marcus and Jennifer more reason to manipulate them, to use them as emotional weapons against me. The scholarship fund will help hundreds of kids over the years, I said. Kids who actually need help, not kids whose parents are using them as bargaining chips. As I drove home from the lawyer's office, my phone started ringing. The old number, the one they didn't know I'd changed. I pulled over and checked the voicemails on speaker, curious to hear their reaction to returning home to the new reality I'd created. Marcus's voice, tight with barely controlled rage. Dad, we need to talk. Now. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it ends today. Jennifer, crying. Daddy, please, I came home to find all my stuff on the sidewalk. The locks are changed and there's a notice saying the property has been sold. I don't have anywhere to go. Amanda, cold and calculated. Robert, you've made your point. But involving the children's school, Marcus's job, and our housing situation crosses the line from discipline into vindictive cruelty. We get it, you were hurt. Now let's be adults and fix this. Adults. There was that word again. The same word Marcus had used on the phone from Hawaii, as if being an adult meant accepting the consequences of your actions only when it was convenient, and expecting forgiveness without offering genuine remorse. The beautiful thing about their voicemails was how clearly they revealed their priorities. Not one of them had apologized for the original betrayal. Not one had acknowledged the hurt they'd caused or expressed genuine regret for their actions. They were angry about the consequences, inconvenienced by the disruption to their lives, frustrated that their victim had finally fought back. But sorry for what they'd done to me. Not a chance. I arrived home to find them waiting in my driveway. All of them, Marcus, Amanda, Jennifer, even the grandchildren. They'd turned my own grandchildren into human shields, counting on my love for Emma and Jake to override my anger at their parents. It was a calculated move, and it might have worked on the old Robert Mitchell. But the old Robert Mitchell was gone. I parked in my garage and walked to the front door without acknowledging them. Marcus jumped out of his rental car and followed me. Dad, we need to talk. I turned around slowly. He looked terrible, sunburned, exhausted, and carrying the particular strain that comes from a week of paradise ruined by the constant stress of phone calls to lawyers, accountants, and property managers, all of whom had the same message: Robert Mitchell has revoked your access to everything. No, I said simply. We don't. Dad, please. Jennifer stepped forward, and I could see she'd been crying recently. Her eyes were red and swollen, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. I know we screwed up, but this is too much. I'm homeless. Marcus is unemployed. You've destroyed our lives over one mistake. One mistake. 8 months of planning, weeks of deliberate deception, a calculated airport ambush, years of financial fraud, and it was one mistake. Jennifer, I said, my voice calm and quiet. Do you remember what you said to me at the airport? She looked confused. Dad, You said it was nothing personal. That you just thought it would be better if I stayed home. Do you remember saying that? Yes, but this is nothing personal either. I just think it would be better if you handled your own problems from now on. Marcus stepped between us, his face flushing with anger. That's enough. You've had your tantrum, you've made your point, you've embarrassed us in front of everyone we know. But Emma and Jake don't deserve this. They love you, and you're punishing them for something they didn't do. I looked past him to where my grandchildren sat in the car, and my heart broke a little. They looked confused and scared, too young to understand the adult drama playing out around them but old enough to sense that something fundamental had changed in their world. You're right, I said. They don't deserve this. They don't deserve parents who steal money from their grandfather's company. They don't deserve parents who plan elaborate betrayals and then use them as emotional weapons. They don't deserve to grow up thinking it's normal to take everything and give nothing back. So what, you're just done with us? Your entire family? Amanda stepped forward, her voice carrying that particular edge of someone who was used to getting her way through manipulation. After everything we've been through together, you're going to throw it all away over hurt feelings? Hurt feelings. The woman who had suggested abandoning me at the airport to avoid dealing with my constant need for validation was reducing this to hurt feelings. Amanda, I said, let me ask you something. When you came up with the idea to leave me at LAX, what did you think would happen? Did you think I'd just go home and wait patiently for you to call when you needed something else? Did you think I'd continue paying Marcus's salary and Jennifer's rent and your children's school fees while you laughed about how pathetic I was? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's not, we never. I have the emails, Amanda. Marcus used his company computer for personal correspondence. I have every conversation where you called me pathetic, every discussion about how the money was too good to give up, every detail of your plan to humiliate me for your own entertainment. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Emma crying in the car. The little girl I loved more than life itself was watching her world fall apart, and there was nothing I could do to protect her without enabling the people who were using her as a weapon. Marcus tried one more approach. Dad, what do you want? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We handled things badly, we hurt your feelings, we made poor choices. There. Now can we move forward? There it was. The non-apology apology. Sorry for hurting my feelings, as if the problem was my emotional reaction rather than their calculated cruelty. Sorry for handling things badly, as if abandoning me at the airport was just a communication issue. Sorry for making poor choices, as if years of theft and manipulation were simply errors in judgment. Marcus, I said, do you understand what you did wrong? Yes. We shouldn't have left you at the airport. It was cruel, and we're sorry. And? He looked confused. And what? And the stealing? And the lying? And the emails calling me pathetic? And using my grandchildren as emotional weapons right now? His face went blank. He genuinely didn't see those as separate issues that required separate acknowledgement and separate apologies. In his mind, a generic, "We're sorry," should cover everything from minor thoughtlessness to major betrayal. Dad, we can work through all of this, but not if you won't even talk to us. I am talking to you. I'm telling you that being sorry you got caught isn't the same as being sorry for what you did. I'm telling you that 30 years of being your father doesn't give you a lifetime pass to treat me however you want. I'm telling you that respect isn't negotiable. I turned toward my front door, then stopped and looked back. When you're ready to take responsibility for what you actually did, not just for the consequences you're facing, you know where to find me. Until then, you're adults. Handle your own problems like adults. I walked into my house and closed the door, leaving them standing in my driveway with their shattered sense of entitlement and their confused, crying children. Through the window, I watched them have a heated discussion by their car. Marcus was gesturing angrily, Amanda was on her phone, Jennifer was pacing in small circles. They stayed for 20 more minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind, probably planning their next approach. Finally, they loaded the children back into the car and drove away. I poured myself a drink and sat in Sarah's chair, the one she'd claimed as her own for the last 5 years of her life, the one I'd never been able to sit in until tonight. I hope I did the right thing, I said to her picture. I hope this is what you'd want me to do. But even as I said it, I knew Sarah would have found a way to forgive them, would have kept the family together regardless of the cost. She was a better person than I was, more generous with her love, more willing to overlook cruelty in the name of family harmony. I wasn't Sarah. And maybe that was okay. Tomorrow, I would start the process of building a new life, one where my value as a person wasn't determined by my usefulness as a bank account, where my love wasn't taken for granted, where my dignity wasn't for sale. It was going to be a lonely life. But it was going to be mine. 6 months passed without a word from any of them. 6 months of silence that felt both liberating and devastating, like recovering from surgery, painful but necessary for healing. I spent those months learning how to be Robert Mitchell the man, rather than Robert Mitchell the father, the provider, the perpetual safety net for adults who had never learned to fly on their own. The first month was the hardest. I would catch myself reaching for my phone to call and check on them, forgetting for a moment that I was no longer welcome in their lives. I'd see something in a store that Emma would love and start to buy it before remembering that I had no way to give it to her. The house felt too quiet, too empty, filled with the echoes of a family that no longer existed. But slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Without the constant stress of managing their crises, without the emotional drain of trying to earn love from people who seemed determined not to give it, I started to remember who I was before I became consumed with being their father. I started dating for the first time since Sarah died. Nothing serious, just dinner companions and afternoon coffee meetings with women I met through church or business functions. It felt strange at first, almost like cheating, but gradually I began to enjoy the simple pleasure of adult conversation with someone who saw me as Robert, not as dad or grandpa or walking checkbook. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my years of trying to rebuild my relationship with my children. Tom and Linda drove down from Phoenix for a long weekend, and we spent hours talking about everything except the family drama that had consumed my life for so long. I threw myself into the scholarship foundation I'd established with my estate. Working with underprivileged kids who wanted to learn construction trades reminded me why I'd fallen in love with building in the first place. These young people were grateful for opportunities, respectful of the knowledge being shared, hungry to learn and earn their way in the world. Everything my own children were not. If you've ever had to cut toxic people out of your life, even family members, you know the mixture of relief and grief that comes with that choice. It's like removing a splinter that's been infected for years. The initial pain of extraction is sharp and immediate, but then comes the blessed relief of healing. If that resonates with you, if you've had to make similar choices, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Because what happened next shocked me as much as it's going to shock you. In May, I received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Elizabeth Franklin, the principal of the private school Marcus's children had attended. She asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss something important about Emma and Jake. My heart raced as I drove to meet her. Had something happened to the children? Were they okay? Despite everything that had transpired with their parents, my love for those kids hadn't diminished at all. Dr. Franklin got straight to the point once we'd ordered our coffee. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted you to know that Emma and Jake are no longer enrolled at our school. Marcus and Amanda withdrew them in February. Why? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Tuition payments stopped in January, and when we contacted Marcus about the overdue balance, he became very angry. He claimed that you had promised to continue paying the children's tuition as part of some family agreement, and that you were punishing innocent children by refusing to honor that commitment. There it was. Even after everything that had happened, even after being caught stealing company funds and being fired for fraud, Marcus was still trying to make me responsible for his children's education, while painting me as the villain for not providing it. Dr. Franklin, I said, I never made any such agreement. Marcus has been fraudulently charging those tuition payments to my company for 2 years without my knowledge. When I discovered the theft, I terminated his employment and revoked his access to company funds. She nodded sadly. I suspected as much. Marcus's story didn't quite make sense, especially given some of the other things I've learned about the family's situation. What other things? Well, this is confidential, but I think you should know. Both children have been displaying behavioral problems since they left our school. Emma, in particular, has been asking teachers and other parents about you constantly. She wants to know why Grandpa doesn't love her anymore, why she can't see you, why you're being mean to her family." The knife twisted in my chest. My sweet Emma, who used to run to me with her arms outstretched whenever I visited, who would climb into my lap and demand story time, who drew me pictures that I still kept on my refrigerator, she thought I didn't love her anymore. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Franklin continued, "I've been working with children for 25 years, and I can tell you that Emma and Jake are caught in the middle of something they don't understand. They're being told that you're the reason for their family's problems, but they remember a grandfather who loved them unconditionally." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I'm suggesting that you might want to consider reaching out to them directly. Not to their parents, to them. They need to know that whatever happened between you and Marcus and Jennifer doesn't change your love for them." I drove home in a fog of conflicting emotions. Every instinct I had as a grandfather screamed at me to call, to visit, to fix this situation immediately. But every hard-learned lesson from the past year warned me that any contact would be seen as weakness by their parents, would be used as leverage in future manipulations. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked at their social media accounts. What I found there broke my heart completely. Jennifer had posted a long message about toxic family members, and how sometimes you have to cut people out of your life for your own mental health. She talked about parents who use money as a weapon and how she was teaching her daughter to value relationships over material possessions. She was rewriting history, casting herself as the victim of an abusive father who had withdrawn his love when she refused to be controlled by his money. The comments were full of support from friends who knew only her version of events. Marcus had been less subtle. His posts were full of pictures of him and Amanda working multiple jobs to make ends meet, with captions about the importance of self-reliance and not depending on people who might betray you. He posted motivational quotes about overcoming adversity and rebuilding after being abandoned by family. Abandoned by family? The man who had told me to go home from the airport, who had stolen $45,000 from my company, who had called me pathetic in emails to his wife, was telling the world that he had been abandoned by family. But the posts that destroyed me were the ones about the children. "Emma asked me today why some grandparents stop loving their grandchildren," Jennifer had written. "I didn't know how to explain that some people's love comes with conditions, and when those conditions aren't met, the love disappears too. Breaking a child's heart to prove a point is the cruelest thing an adult can do." The comments on that post were brutal. Friends and strangers alike condemned the unnamed grandfather who could abandon innocent children, who could punish kids for their parents' actions, who could be so heartless as to withdraw love from little ones who didn't understand adult conflicts. I was being painted as a monster, and I had no way to defend myself without sinking to their level of public manipulation. That night, I sat in my living room surrounded by pictures of Emma and Jake, photos from birthdays and holidays and ordinary Sunday afternoons when we'd been a family. I thought about Emma asking why Grandpa doesn't love her anymore, and I cried harder than I had since Sarah's funeral. This was the price of standing up to my children. This was the cost of refusing to be their victim any longer. The people I loved most in the world, two innocent children who had nothing to do with their parents' cruelty, were paying the price for my decision to demand respect. For the first time since that horrible day at LAX, I began to wonder if I had gone too far. It was Emma's 9th birthday that broke me. July 15th, a date I had circled on my calendar every year since she was born, a day that had always meant princess themes and elaborate birthday parties and a grandfather who spoiled her shamelessly with gifts that made her parents roll their eyes but made her squeal with delight. I woke up that morning thinking about the purple bicycle with streamers on the handlebars that I'd bought her for her 6th birthday, about the dollhouse we'd assembled together when she was 7, about the art supplies that had sparked her love of drawing when she turned 8. This year, for the first time since she was born, I had nothing to give her but my absence. I spent the morning trying to distract myself with work, but by afternoon I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to the park where I used to take Emma and Jake, sat on our favorite bench, and called Dr. Franklin. "I need to ask you something," I said when she answered. If I were to reach out to Emma and Jake directly, just to let them know I still love them, would their parents use that against me somehow? There was a long pause. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to tell you something in confidence. Amanda brought both children to see me last week. She wanted to discuss their behavioral issues and asked if I thought they needed counseling to help them process their grandfather's abandonment. What did you tell her? I told her that children don't need counseling to process abandonment. They need reassurance that they haven't been abandoned. I suggested that maybe the problem wasn't the children's behavior, but the adult conflict they were being forced to navigate. How did she react to that? She became very defensive. She said you had made your choice to cut them out of your life, and that she wasn't going to expose her children to someone who could stop loving them so easily. Stop loving them so easily. As if loving them less would have made any of this easier. As if every day without their laughter in my house wasn't a small death. As if choosing to protect my own dignity meant I had stopped being their grandfather. Dr. Franklin, what would happen if I just showed up at their school? Or sent them letters? Honestly? I think Amanda and Marcus would use it as evidence that you're trying to manipulate the children, that you're causing them emotional distress by confusing them about family boundaries. They've already painted you as the villain in this story. Any contact would be twisted to support that narrative. I hung up the phone feeling more hopeless than I had in months. The children I loved were being used as weapons against me, but any attempt to reach out to them would only give their parents more ammunition. I was trapped in a situation where the only way to prove my love was to stay away, and staying away was being used as proof that I didn't love them. That evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang at 7:30, and when I looked through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize standing on my porch with a little girl who looked remarkably like Emma. I opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? Mr. Mitchell? I'm Sarah Chin. I'm Emma's teacher at Lincoln Elementary. This is my daughter Lily, she's in Emma's class. Oh. Hello? I wasn't sure why Emma's teacher was at my door, but I invited them in. I hope you don't mind me coming by unannounced, Sarah said as we settled in my living room. But Emma talks about you constantly, and when I saw your address in her school file I thought I thought you should know some things. Lily, who looked to be about Emma's age, was staring at me with open curiosity. Are you really Emma's grandpa? She says you used to make the best pancakes in the world. My throat tightened. I used to make her pancakes, yes. Sarah Chin leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, I don't know what happened between you and Emma's parents, and it's not my business. But what I can tell you is that Emma is struggling. She's withdrawn, her grades are slipping, and she cries at school at least once a week. What does she cry about? You. She tells anyone who will listen that her grandpa used to love her but doesn't anymore. She draws pictures of you constantly, always with sad faces, always with you far away from the rest of the family. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. She made this for you last week. She asked me to give it to you if I ever met you. I unfolded the paper with shaking hands. It was a crayon drawing of a little girl and an older man separated by what looked like a wall. Above the little girl were the words, "I miss you, Grandpa," in careful 9-year-old handwriting. Above the older man, she had written, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My granddaughter thought she needed to apologize to me. She thinks she did something wrong." Sarah continued. "She thinks that's why you don't want to see her anymore. I've tried to explain that sometimes grown-ups have problems that have nothing to do with children, but she doesn't understand." I looked up at this teacher who had risked getting involved in a family situation that wasn't her responsibility, who had cared enough about one of her students to track down the grandfather who was supposedly causing her pain. "Mrs. Chen, what do you think I should do? I think you should ask yourself what's more important, winning a war with Emma's parents, or making sure Emma knows she's loved." Lily spoke up from where she'd been quietly examining my living room. "Emma says you have pictures of her everywhere, but I don't see any." She was right. In my anger at Marcus and Jennifer, I had put away all the family photos. The house that had once been a shrine to my grandchildren now looked like the home of a man with no family at all. That night, After Sarah and Lily left, I went to my closet and pulled out the boxes of photographs I'd hidden away. Pictures of Emma's first steps, Jake's kindergarten graduation, family Christmas mornings, birthday parties, ordinary Tuesday afternoons that had meant everything to me. As I looked through those photos, I realized something that changed everything. In every single picture, Emma and Jake were looking at me with pure, uncomplicated love. They had never asked me for money, never manipulated my emotions, never treated me as anything other than the grandfather who adored them. I had been punishing them for their parents' sins. The war I was fighting with Marcus and Jennifer was destroying the relationships that mattered most to me. I was losing my grandchildren to prove a point to my children, and that was a trade I was no longer willing to make. I sat down at my computer and began typing, not a social media post this time, but a letter. 2 letters, actually. One to Emma and one to Jake, written carefully so that even if their parents read them first, there would be nothing they could use against me. Dear Emma, I wrote, I want you to know that Grandpa loves you more than all the stars in the sky, more than all the fish in the ocean, more than all the pancakes we could ever make together. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that have nothing to do with the children they love, and I'm sorry if our disagreement has made you think that anything could ever change how much I love you. I wrote for over an hour, pouring my heart onto paper, trying to find words that would reach a 9-year-old girl who thought her grandfather had stopped loving her. When I finished, I sealed both letters in envelopes and addressed them to the children at their school. But before I mailed them, I made one more decision. I picked up my phone and called the number I'd memorized but hadn't used in 7 months. Marcus answered on the 3rd ring. Dad? The surprise in his voice was clear. He hadn't expected to hear from me, probably thought he never would again. Marcus, I said, we need to talk. Not about the money, not about the company, not about the apartment. About Emma and Jake. There was a long pause. What about them? They think I don't love them anymore. They think they did something wrong. They're suffering because of a conflict between adults that has nothing to do with them. Dad, you're the one who cut us out of your life. You're the one who... Stop. My voice was firm but not angry. I'm not calling to rehash what happened between us. I'm calling because 2 innocent children are being hurt, and I want to fix that. Another pause. What do you want? I want to see my grandchildren. I want them to know they're loved. I want to take them for pancakes and help them with their homework and be their grandfather again. And what about us? What about our relationship? That's a separate issue, Marcus. Whether or not you and I can ever repair our relationship shouldn't determine whether I can have one with Emma and Jake. I could hear him talking to Amanda in the background, muffled conversation that went on for nearly a minute. Finally, he came back on the line. We'll think about it, he said. But there would have to be conditions. Of course there would be conditions. Everything with my children came with conditions. What kind of conditions? Supervised visits only. No gifts that we haven't approved. No talking to them about what happened between us. And if you ever try to turn them against us, if you ever use them to get back at us, the visits stop immediately. Supervised visits with my own grandchildren. Approved gifts. Monitored conversations. It was humiliating, treating me like some kind of dangerous influence in their lives. But Emma thought I didn't love her anymore. Jake was probably wondering why Grandpa had disappeared from his life. If supervised visits were what it took to let them know they were still loved, then supervised visits were what I would accept. Okay, I said. When can I see them? We arranged for the following Saturday at a public park, neutral territory where Marcus and Amanda could watch from a distance while I reintroduced myself to the grandchildren who had been the greatest joy of my life. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this wasn't victory or defeat in my war with my children. This was something more important. It was choosing love over pride, relationship over revenge, healing over winning. The old Robert Mitchell might have seen this as weakness, as letting Marcus and Jennifer win by forcing me to accept their conditions just to see my grandchildren. But the new Robert Mitchell understood something more important, Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit that being right isn't worth losing the people you love most. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I had pancakes to make, stories to read, and 2 hearts to heal, theirs and mine. For the first time in 7 months, I had something to look forward to that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with love. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. If you've ever found yourself choosing between pride and love, between being right and being happy, between winning a war and preserving what matters most, I hope my story helps you choose wisely. Sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop fighting. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is forgive, not because someone deserves it, but because you deserve peace. And sometimes the most important lesson life teaches us is that love, real love, isn't about what we can get from people, it's about what we can give, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when we don't get anything back. My relationship with Marcus and Jennifer may never be what I hoped it would be. But my relationship with Emma and Jake? That's worth fighting for, worth swallowing my pride for, worth every compromise I have to make. Because in the end, the love of a child is the purest thing in this world, and protecting that love is more important than protecting my ego. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, family isn't just about the people who share your DNA. It's about the people who choose to love you, even when it's difficult, even when you don't deserve it, even when the world gives them every reason to walk away. Those are the people worth keeping. Those are the relationships worth saving. And those are the battles worth fighting. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you with yours.